This is the Marriage Podcast, and I'm your host, Alexandra Stockwell. I'm a physician turned relationship and intimacy expert, and I specialize in showing couples how to have incredible, passionate relationships. I myself have been married for 25 years. My husband and I have 4 children and full professional lives, and we've created an amazing relationship. If you want to deepen your understanding of your own relationship and learn to access new heights of emotional, sensual, and erotic intimacy, you're in the right place because I will show you how. Let's dive in. Hey everyone, this is Alexandra, and we're about to have a conversation that I've actually been dying to have for a few years. This conversation is with Jennifer Kem and Nathan Francisco. I know Jen because she was a mentor for me. Well, is a mentor, I'll go ahead and say. When it comes to these things, there's not really an expiration date on it, but I was enrolled in Jen's program because she is a Bay Area brand and marketing expert who gets entrepreneurs seen, heard, and paid for being themselves. And Nathan, I want to hear what you say about yourself, but one of the main things that I know about you is that you are an incredible manly man, and you have chosen Slay at Home Dad for your social media handle. And I just think that says so much about the relationship the two of you have, your own self-respect, and I want to dive into it. But before I go any further, anything you want to add so that listeners who know you get to hear something juicy or haven't met you yet, Jennifer, know who you are?
Wow, thank you for that. I think that besides the business identity that I have, the other identity that's even more important to me is wife and mother to 3 kids. We have a 24-year-old, a 19-year-old, and a 6-year-old, which presents different exciting opportunities and also challenges in those different seasons of life. And so I would say that's the other thing I would identify as.
Okay, I'm so glad you brought that in. And actually, I specifically resonate with that so deeply because my children span the ages of 9 and 24. And it's not a situation where there's one every 2 years. There are these big gaps. And I actually feel like technically we have 3 eldest children and 1 second child because of the gaps. And you have 2 eldest children based on the psychology. Okay, thank you. Nathan?
I am an overthinker. As Jen would say, textbook left-hander Capricorn, and that aspect of the way I think and the way I process things. And then there's some unique things here and there that don't necessarily jive with that whole moniker. But for the most part, I'm a typical guy. Really, it's about it. The attention span is fairly short with certain things, and then when there's something that's in my lane, in my alley, you can't distract me from that. So fairly simple guy.
What a beautiful opening scene, so to speak. I would love so much for the two of you to tell your love story, both because what I know about it, it's beautiful, and because I don't actually know if you've been married before, Nathan, or not, but I know that you have, Jen, and you are an extremely intentional human being. So if you chose another deep, lasting relationship, that's not just something you happen to land in, or maybe it is, but it doesn't feel like you maintain it that way. So will you share when you first met and how things have evolved that bring you to the partnership you have now?
Well, I just want to open by saying it's a long, winding yarn. And so we have a very interesting story. So I actually would like Nate to tell it because I will just say this. Our hashtag for our relationship is 30 years in the making. That's literally the hashtag we use whenever we describe our relationship. So one of the ways that I describe myself, and I think Nate would too, is I'm not a spring chicken, I'm a seasoned chicken. In terms of whether it's work or it's personal, I have an intentionality. And part of it comes from the wisdom of living and making a ton of mistakes, especially in the relationship realm. So I will just say that as an opener, 30 years in the making. So let that give you a little preview about what Nate is about to share about us.
So Jen and I grew up in the same little plantation town in Hawaii, small neighborhood, a few thousand people. So everybody more or less knew everybody, or there was some connection to your neighbor or people down the street. So Jen and I, we went to different schools, but we had mutual friends, and we initially met or knew of each other at the summer program that our local rec center had every year.
We were like fourth graders, basically.
Yeah, we're about 9 years old or so. Yeah. I know everybody in my school and I knew a good portion of people from other schools, but Jen stood out because, well, one, her white skin. She was very fair. She still is. She has freckles and her hair is red. Now you have to imagine in my town, I'm used to brown skin, dark hair, kind of cookie cutter, if you will. Obviously, regardless, she's beautiful, but she stood out. So I asked my friends who were her friend, our mutual friends, hey, who is that? She said her name. And I thought, okay, found out, I did my research as a 9-year-old could, what school she went to and whatnot, real basic details. And that was it.
He had a crush on me, Alexandra, apparently. I didn't know this, had no idea.
Yeah, right. And I didn't think she knew me because we didn't really speak.
It sounds like that kind of crush, which on the inside feels really serious, even if the people around would easily dismiss it.
Oh, yeah. No, definitely. And it was obvious because I would ask about her. What's her name? Oh, where is she? Is she coming today? Stuff like that. And people are like, my friends would dismiss it, whatever, get over it. And I did, and it was done with. Fast forward to 2013. So we got to know each other very little in high school. Again, she went to another school, and her best friend at the time, I ended up taking her to my winter ball, my school's winter ball. And Jen tagged along for the after party, which I couldn't go to because I had an early curfew. So we met up, we talked, and again, when I left, that was it.
He had a date with my best friend and stop saying it wasn't a date. You brought it to the winter ball. It's okay, babe. It's okay. And we were eating at his house in the driveway, Alexandra, and I had bought a steak. And we come from very simple beginnings, as Nate mentioned, very hardworking Filipino immigrant families. And so getting a steak at a restaurant seemed like a big deal. And so I felt like I wanted a steak. So I bought a steak and we brought it to his house in the driveway because he had to go home. And I didn't know him well. And I remember him making this comment like, "Ooh, like you're eating steak?" And I'm thinking, what's wrong with that? And I've always been this kind of person where like, you get what you want. And so we had a very different way of looking, I think, at life. We still do. Anyway, fast forward to Mark Zuckerberg's involvement in our relationship.
So one more thing, during that same evening, her friend mentioned, oh, hey, we're going to go pick up Jen after the ball. We're going to go get dinner and stuff. And I was like, oh, she's coming? Like, what time are you going to pick her up? Like, when? And I was kind of inquisitive. And she was like, do you like her or something? And I'm like, no, I was just wondering. And her friend made it a point to say, she doesn't like guys like you anyway. And I thought, oh, well.
Oh, I can feel when you say that went and stuck.
Yeah. Oh, and it did. And it did, because I actually mentioned it to Jen on our first date. But so, and it hit me like, okay, yeah, well, then clearly she's off limits. And in my head, I kind of assumed that for whatever reason, just there was this mystery around her. And I thought, okay, well, I'm not going to even try. Why set myself up for that?
So that's 16 years old about. So just to give people timeline, like, so it was like 9 and then 16-ish age.
So fast forward to 2012, 2011, 2012-ish, Facebook. We get in touch, we become friends, but there was no communication. It was just, we're friends and that's it. I started posting things about how I enjoy Bloody Marys. She messages me about that, and short conversation. Hey, I like Bloody Marys too. And then I make this post. There was a game on Facebook that you had to give up a certain amount of facts about yourself that no one knew. So 2 facts on there that struck a nerve with her was, one, the name Jen, Jenny, or Jennifer, any derivative of Jennifer is bad luck to me, because prior to meeting Jen, just in the last, I don't know how many years, the name Jennifer just was bad luck. And then another thing that said, redheads make me weak. I've always had a thing for redheads, not realizing again that Jennifer Kem is a redhead. She has dark red hair. So she messages me. It was during a football game on a Sunday. And she says, what's the deal? What's your problem with Jennifer's? Like, how dare you?
Now you're getting a little insight about me. Like, I made that post about me and we barely talked. Like, it's so funny.
Yeah, it was just the weirdest thing. And I was on defense, like trying to get my foot out of my mouth. And I was like, oh God, no, that wasn't about you. And she's like, clearly, one of her responses was like, clearly, you've been messing with the wrong Jennifers your whole life. I'm like, oh, okay. So I kind of took that as an invitation, but still standoffish.
But what's weird, I have to say, because I want to make sure that people know this, is Nate was married before, just like I was. And to be honest with you, I thought he was still married. Okay. And I wasn't trying to flirt with him, but I can see when we got back together, I really was like, because I'm a curious person. And I was like, what do you have against Jennifer's? I need to hear this story. And I think he thought I knew he was no longer married, but I actually thought he was married because we had been friends for a while on Facebook and I saw him get married, like the pictures and so I just assumed. And so I really came from it, I promise y'all, like from a pure curiosity because we were childhood friends, kind of. And so I was like, oh my God, I got to hear about this. And that's how it provoked literally like a 3-hour chat back and forth while we were watching the San Francisco 49ers play the Saints on a Sunday. And it became this dialogue. And then he asked at the end of it, hey, I don't really know what you do in the world, but every time you write something on Facebook, it's really inspiring. That's what he told me because he didn't know what I did for a living. And I said, oh, thank you. And he said, by the way, if you're ever in town, would you like to go have a light meal? That's how he described it. And I laughed at him in Messenger because we weren't talking on the phone. This was literally Messenger going back and forth for 3 hours. And he says, I said, what is a light meal? I've never heard anybody ask me.
And that's a long running joke.
As opposed to a steak.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Drinks and an appetizer, a light meal.
See how he was like thinking too much, like overthinking too, like, oh, a steak sounds serious. So that's how it started, is Mark Zuckerberg really brought us together. So.
But that's so amazing because I feel like that's, of the many things that you teach entrepreneurs to do, that's what you teach entrepreneurs to do, Jen, not to find a husband or someone who may become a husband, but to find the relationships that will further them in life through showing up online in an authentic, genuine, real way, which is what you're describing. Like your posts were inspiring to Nate, and then you said, what do you have against Jennifer's? Like that just seems like a microcosm of how you teach people to develop relationships for business.
I never thought of it that way, Alexandra, but thanks for that perspective because that feels right.
Yeah. In all honesty, on our first date, actually our only real date, was probably the most authentic I've ever been with someone that I was interested in. There's always smoke and mirrors. A lot of people in general try to make themselves seem better than they really are, or try to hide certain things. But if we're cursing a little bit
Go
on
ahead.
The podcast, may I? One of the first things that I told her while we were laughing, and I told her, I'm kind of an asshole. And she was like, no, you're not. And I said, no, but I am. I've been told that, and I got to kind of agree. I will say things that are a little inappropriate, a little sarcastic at the wrong times. And
he has a very interesting
communication style. Okay. Well, I want to use this to segue into something that I'm going to say in broad strokes, and then the two of you pick up on whatever calls to you. But again, knowing your relationship, mostly from what you've just shared, and just like smelling a little bit of this when Jen talks about being married on stage at business events, there are so many things that trip women up and also trip some men up in heteronormative relationships. And that is about, you shouldn't be so authentic. That one isn't really that interesting because, as far as I'm concerned, it's very hard to make a good case for not being authentic. But when a woman earns more, it gets very complicated in many relationships. When a woman expresses her power fully without dialing down to accommodate anyone else, really, and I don't mean being aggressive, I just mean being authentically true to the expanded nature she has, people get tripped up, either actually or they think it's going to trip up a relationship. Where a simple guy, as you describe yourself, Nate, we generally in the culture, we think, well, that person isn't going to feel good stepping into a more supportive role in a partnership so that the whole family can flourish. And I would just love to hear how you see yourselves in terms of the things that I've detailed. And was it challenging to navigate it? Did you both just feel like, oh, like this is the right relationship? How did you get to have this situation where in business, on stage, in social media, you are as kick-ass as they come, Jen, huge heart and unapologetically you. And Nate, you are loud and proud as a slay at home dad. How did the two of you get there?
So when Jen and I, once we established the relationship, she was completing up a contracted job, I guess, so to speak. She was contracted out. And she had mentioned a few times that she's going to start elevating herself. She's going to start doing things on her own and branch out and keep that going. I was at a job where I was unhappy, and she was like, well, go back. So I was in the medical field, but I've got a degree in design, in graphic design. She said, go back to doing that. And I said, well, I got the medical thing going. She was like, you're not happy. We had the baby was just born, not shortly before that. And she said, look, either I'm going to hire help or you can help. And I was really smitten by fatherhood. That's my first baby. So I was like, okay, we sat down and we kind of established, like, what are the rules? What are we doing? Am I housekeeper, babysitter? Like, what is that? And again, it's something that we revisit every few months to establish, hey, this is necessary, this isn't. And we just had that conversation just the other day, actually.
Q1 relationship negotiation or relationship agreement visited, and then you do it again in Q2. I mean, is it on the calendar that way? Or do you initiate one of those revisiting it because things feel not quite optimal?
It's the latter. Yeah, the latter. So we basically, once we agree, we go with it until we feel something like a tinge or something is either off or it doesn't feel aligned anymore. Then it comes up and then we try. We're not perfect at it, because I think that's one of the main questions we get is, how do you make these decisions? And I call it bamboo decision making, meaning like we're very strong as a family, like material wise, like we're like committed to that, but we're flexible in helping see if we have to shift and change. And so we don't have it scheduled. I think we intended when we first agreed and aligned around this agreement. And as it grew, we're just like, no, we're going to come at it as grownups as much as we can. But it doesn't mean that there isn't tension when the shift happens, because there is. Trust me.
Yeah, you could imagine. Yeah, there's tension and people think, oh, how perfect. And I'm like, no, we argue. Things won't jive to somebody's opinion. And we got to figure out, okay, well, why not? Let's find a solution to it. If someone's not going to be 100% agreeing with it, but if it works, then we get over that. And that's kind of been the process there. It's been working out to where I've been able to be supportive. Now prior to Jen, obviously I was head of my own household. So to be in a supportive role, one of the first things I told her was like, actually I told her, you need to make me feel like a man. Like, I'm not Alice from the Brady Bunch or June Cleaver. And she was like, what does that look like?
That is such an ideal response. What does that look like? Especially if what you're saying is, you need to make me feel like a man. Not you need to treat me like a man, but you need to make me feel like a man. Let's keep going, but I just want to like highlight and put glitter over the response. What does that look like? Because that actually is doing exactly what you're saying, because it's letting you lead how those interactions happen so they work for you. I just think it's very easy when we're married to think, oh, so I'll do this because that'll be good for him. And to just ask, well, what does that look like for you? But go ahead.
Yeah. And so while I was trying to muster up what that looked like, she kind of gave herself a title. And the title was, well, look at it this way. I am the CEO of the business. You are the CEO of the house. And I'm not taking that from you. You don't touch my business. You support me where I need you. I support where you need to, but that's where I'm not going to overstep you. You're not going to tell me how to run my business. And now when it comes to to parenting and decisions, of course, we consult. But if I'm in the kitchen or if I'm doing something household wise, she won't interrupt me. She'll let me do what I need to. And we go from there and it works. That's kind of our defining space within the household. So by doing that, she gives me that power, quote unquote power, so to speak. Even though it's a combined effort, it makes me feel like a man, that I've got a role, I've got a title, I've got something that's important to me that I can take pride in. And that's kind of where it comes from. That's how that worked out for us. And that's a theme that we've rolled with, and it works.
Amazing. What's that like, Jen, to walk in the door for when you would leave for work or trips? Okay, let's just imagine that. You walk in the door and your man is CEO of your home. I think that's something that is really hard for most women to imagine. Women who carry the emotional labor as well as all of their other responsibilities, because when we're talking about you being CEO, Nate, that means you perceive the issues, you address the issues, you're doing the quote emotional labor. So what is that like to walk in the door, be at home, and not be carrying that piece?
It feels like relief, and it feels like it's really what I wanted my whole life. But I was afraid to say that, to because I was taught at an early age, and I think all women, as a generalization, feel that pressure. But especially when you grow up in a culture that we did, Filipino women do not supersede their men, if you will. You must take care of the home, watch the kids, also bring home some financial support. Like back in the old days, we definitely have this, the man worked, the woman didn't, but that's not true in our culture, and I would say just generally in the global world now. But I, at a very early age, when we're Gen Xers, I always say, like, again, I'm a seasoned chicken, not a spring chicken. I was told at an early age, my mom just straight up told me, you're never going to find a man who will appreciate your ambition. And so either you've got to marry somebody, she straight up told me, she was like, you got to marry a man who has his own career and is so ambitious that where you intersect is having a legacy by having children, but you're probably not going to be happy. You're not going to have a sexy marriage. Like, my mom told me those things, and she wasn't trying to do harm. She was just trying to be honest and realistic.
She was trying to tell you how it is.
Yeah. Yeah. She still tells me that, just to let you know, even though our relationship is a great model for something different. My mom still is like, I don't know how you guys are doing this. This must be fake. And what I like to tell people is we fight really hard for this. And what I mean is, it's actually not easy in what you described, Alexandra, as a heteronormative societal construct of how it should look, especially for women, because women are expected to work. In fact, the current statistic is 2.5 million. This is startling. 2.5 million women left the workforce in 2020 because of the pressure. 2.5 million American women decided that, well, if someone's got to homeschool the kids because of the pandemic, it's going to be me. Like, it's more the default is the female.
It is amazing. And we have 4 children, as I said earlier, and the oldest is 24. So, and we're celebrating our 25th wedding anniversary in March of this year. So we've had a lot of evolution of different ways of doing things. And my husband is a physician and has worked really long hours for most of our marriage. And coming up on 2 years ago, he went to 3 days a week so that I could really expand my business. And the reason that I'm saying this is that on those days when he's home, I had a lot of internal growth to do, to just let it be and focus on what I'm doing from when I wake up to when I go to bed, if that's what I want to do. Like, the kind of what the two of you have created, and as you say, you fight for it. I think one of the fights, at least for me, was to receive what is very willingly given.
Yeah, definitely. That's why I said, I think my word was relief, because in that relief is receiving that this is possible, that I could be in a relationship where, because just like he says, I want to still feel like a man, I still want to feel like a woman. I still want, yes, I want the roses on Valentine's. I don't want to be treated like a dude in our personal relationship. Where we've gotten into it in terms of disagreements, and on both sides, is where I think sometimes I forget that he's a man and he forgets I'm a woman. And we have to kind of remember that because of the societal construct, right, that we're in.
I love that. So one question that I ask all guests is this, because I deeply believe that relationships are the greatest vehicle for personal growth. And so I'd love to hear from each of you. What have you learned about yourself as a direct result of being in relationship with the other one?
Oh, wow. Let me go first on that one. I think I did the most growing on this since we got together. I've learned because of her, I am more capable than I could have imagined that I was. She's allowed me to be that way. I needed one of those, I needed permission. And once I got it, it's like, okay, I really can. And I'm stronger than I thought I was. And there's a lot. I've always been kind of an oddball growing up. And it's being with her because she's experienced the same things. In that sense, it's okay to be a little odd and you can make it work. You don't have to be confined to, again, to what society says this is what you're supposed to be. And really and truly not giving a damn what everybody else is saying. It means that much more these days.
I just want to amplify what Nate just said, because he still gets some shit from people being the stay-at-home dad, his friends and strangers who are like, dude. And it's more like they're trying to emasculate him, but that's not something I do. Just, I don't want him to defeminize me. And so just to answer the question, what have I learned is that I've learned I'm not bad at relationships, because that was a thought that I had. In fact, before Nate and I got together, honestly, Alexandra, I thought, I'm going to be an old maid. I'm going to have fun. I'm going to have sexy time. I'm going to date. And once I got divorced, and that was I have nothing negative to say about it, because my ex-husband is a good person. We just were never compatible. We probably should have never been married to begin with, but it's because back then, Alexandra, I thought this was my give to my family. If I conform and do that part in the relationship realm, and this is why I love this question that you're asking, I thought that was my contribution to my family. And I was too young and naive. I was smart in different ways, but not in that realm. I just wanted to please, especially my mother, if that's the God honest truth. And I don't blame her. It's just that now looking back, I can realize that's where my head was. And so then I also made that mean I was bad at it. And that, okay, when I got the courage to leave the marriage, because I didn't have a good, compelling reason to leave, let's put it that way. And that was what really set my family and my culture on fire against me, because it was like, he's not cheating on you. He's not a bad guy. He's not a this and that. And you're leaving. That means you're giving up, or you're poor, you're junk, you're bad, you're broken. Right. And I know it was more like, I realized I actually wasn't supposed to get in that relationship to begin with, but I settled, not because he's bad and I'm better, but because I knew I had this path, this purpose and vision for my life. And so anyway, what this relationship has taught me is that's not true, that I actually can be good at relationships, and that I can be me and still be loved and appreciated and treated like a lady. But I honestly didn't think that was possible just 8-9 years ago. I was like, okay, I'm always going to be seen as this confident, aggressive woman who is a ball basher, if you will. Again, I didn't think that, but I had that experience even corporate. When I worked in the corporate world before I became my own business owner, men were intimidated by me. I was like, ooh, here comes Jen Kem, sexy and sassy and smart. And I can say those things with humility, because I didn't see myself like that, but I heard that's how people saw me. And it just made me feel like, oh, that's a bad thing. Like, being me is a bad thing. And I think that's why, obviously, my mission now is to help as many people get seen, heard, and paid to be themselves, because it's literally transformed my life. And this relationship has been proof and nutrition to support that. It was like the last link of my life. I'm still growing and figuring myself out, but I thought that was the area that I was just kind of calling it in. Like, I'm always going to suck at it, so fine. And now I feel like, no, I'm useful in it, is how I would describe it. Like, I'm useful in it. And that matters to me. So
when you said the thing that you've learned is that you're good at relationships, and then you kind of snuck in there that you can be loved for who you are, that I was going to ask you, okay, so how has that impacted the rest of your life? But I think you've answered that just now. And I thank you both for such well-seasoned answers. And I think that's a good segue. Jen, if you want to say anything about the archetype influence mix, because you're making that available to listeners.
Well, first of all, Alexandra, thank you so much for this conversation, because Nate and I don't get a chance to really together talk about this part of the journey. And yet it's one of the biggest questions we both get, right, Nate? Like, we get, how do you guys do it? And so thank you for giving us this space to share some of our story.
You're welcome. Every couple that I've interviewed so far, and I forget how many it's been, maybe it's been 10, it's the first time that they've been interviewed together. And I haven't said this before, but I do think of it as a gift. And the reason is that I was once in a program with a woman who was trying to decide whether or not she wanted to move ahead towards marriage with this man she'd been with for 6 years or not. And so part of figuring that out was that she interviewed couples who had relationships she admired. And so she interviewed my husband and me. It was actually when we were moving from Massachusetts to Kansas. So he was in the car driving across the prairie, and I was in Massachusetts with the kids, and she did the interview. And she found it very useful, but it completely transformed our relationship to be able to hear what one another said, things that they just don't come up. So I'm really happy that you've had that experience. And anyone listening, I recommend that you have somebody interview you and your person, because it really does open something up. And it's totally different than going to therapy or getting coaching, to just have a conversation like this.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, thank you. So to answer your question again, thank you so much. And obviously, I've had the pleasure and privilege of working with incredible thought leaders like Alexandra, who are doing big things and healing the world in the way that where their expertise can support them. So if you're that type of person and you want to get seen, heard, and paid to be you, I have a tool or a diagnostic that I use in my company. It's called the Brand Archetype Assessment. And typically we sell it every single day, but I want to give it to Alexandra's listeners for free. So if you go to jenniferkem.com/marriage, you'll access that diagnostic that we use. Alexandra, I see her as not just a former physician, but she's also a healer of humans through relationship coaching. And I feel like my gift and talent is helping heal people's fear of being seen, heard, and paid to be themselves. And so this particular diagnostic is kind of the first step to doing that. So I hope it serves whoever's listening.
Yeah, it's an amazing tool. And in a way, everything we've talked about pertains to what's available. I love, by the way, that it's /marriage. That'll be in the show notes as well. But I just love that that's how you've created this gift. And because I remember when I did it, it was like parts of myself that I thought I should be hiding as a result. I mean, as a businesswoman, as someone putting myself out there as a relationship coach, when I got my archetypes, I was like, oh, this thing that I thought I should be hiding and really emphasizing this, actually, it makes sense to share this a little bit more. And actually, I'm reminded one of my archetypes from doing the quiz is provocateur. And I know that about myself. And my husband, he'll often say, because he's not that way at all, he'll refer to the imp. Like there are things that I'll say or do. I mean, there's the sexy provocateur, but then there's also the rule breaking, see things differently, come from behind element, which he refers to as, oh, the imp is here. But ever since doing that, I have sprinkled provocateur energy into my brand. But that is me having taken advantage of this gift that you're giving the audience. And so I wanted to say that. And I also want to just take the moment to honor you, because my signature program is the Aligned and Hot Marriage program, and you're the one who gave me that name. So I want to celebrate that. And it seems so perfect because the two of you embody the alignment, and we didn't really get into it, but I'm presuming the heat follows.
Well, I think so. Nate was kind of worried that you were going to ask about the sexy stuff, because he was like, is she going to ask about our, and I said, what if she does? We're ready to talk about it. Maybe he's not, but I'm okay. But I love that. And I think that's the power of also just being like in relationship with other couples and seeing their real story. And I love that you're using I see the provocateur really sprinkled. And Nate is actually a dominant provocateur too. And that's his. So that's what he said when he said to me, I'm an a-hole, like people say that to me. And it was interesting because I didn't give him my test or anything at that point. But later when he took it, I was like, it makes so much sense, because you think people who are offended or triggered by you just being a rebel a little bit and you kind of spice, he's like that. And I said, this is very much who you are. So it's okay. And I get it. So.
Okay, fantastic. Well, anyone listening, make sure that you get the gift of looking in the mirror in just this way, because it really is transformational. And I know it's been a busy week, a busy day. It is a busy life. You're in the midst of a move. The pandemic is happening. The list is really long. And I just am so, so grateful that you've chosen to co-create this little oasis with me today so that other people can be inspired, quite frankly. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexandra.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Marriage Podcast. Please rate and review the show on iTunes. It really makes a difference. And if you have a question or a comment, reach out to me via my website at alexandrastockwell.com.